So to cut a long story short, that was a defining moment because here I was, relative nobody, standing on stage, presenting at a SourceCon event, and I launched my own business that week. So Shannon actually gave me the confidence to launch my own business.
Welcome to another episode of the speakEZ podcast. I am so excited to have my special guest, Vanessa Raath. She brings over 17 years of experience in the recruitment industry with a focus on tech sector. But her journey didn't start there. Before diving into the world of recruitment, Vanessa's path took her through various adventures, from teaching school children in London to scuba diving in Southeast Asia and East Africa. I am so excited to bring her on because she's a well-known speaker, well-known thought leader within the space, and she has some exciting things to share with the audience. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Daniel. I'm a big fan of speakEZ and your teams. It's an absolute pleasure to meet with you. Thanks for inviting me to join you.
We always ask every single person, can you share a little bit about your journey into the world of recruiting? What initially sparked your interest, and currently what are you doing right now?
Well, what sparked my interest to get into recruitment was the fact that I needed to eat. To be honest with you, I had returned from, as you mentioned, being a scuba diving instructor all over the world. I hadn't returned back to South Africa as a millionaire. I had very little money, in fact. And I went for an interview at a recruitment agency and they offered me a recruiting job on the spot. And I was like, well, I've never recruited. This is not what I'm here for. I want to do adult education, but literally didn't have an option. It was just like, well, I need to do something. I was in my 30s. I'd had to move back home with my parents, and it just wasn't great. So I said, okay, well, why not? Let me give it a bash. So that was my journey into recruiting, is that my parents weren't in a position to still be supporting me. I literally had no money and I needed to make money to eat. So it was great though. It really was a wonderful move. I don't regret it, but it was completely unplanned.
There's so many options when you came back looking for that next career. Was there somebody that was nudging you, hey, this is a really cool field to be in? Or what was that story like?
Well, it was actually my cousin. So my cousin and I are very close. She's like a sister to me, and we had both studied teaching together. So I'm a qualified teacher, school teacher, and had been teaching in the UK and had been doing a bit of teaching on my travels. I didn't want to go back into teaching myself. It doesn't really pay that well in South Africa. And my cousin, who was a teacher, while I had been traveling around the world for several years, had gone into recruitment as a teacher. So she was working at the agency, us being very close, we chatted. I was on my way home. She said, oh, don't worry, I'll get you into here. I'll make sure that I get you an interview. And I was like, well, again, not really what I want to do, but beggars can't be choosers. And then a lot of pressure from my parents onto her, onto me to try and, make something of my life and not just be a beach bum for the rest of the time. I knew that I wanted to stay in Johannesburg because I was coming back to South Africa to be closer to family. So Johannesburg landlocked. There was no diving that was happening there. So yeah, I just kind of went with it. And it actually just turned out to be phenomenal. It has been a wonderful decision.
I see you places all over the world speaking at conferences. Walk us through currently what you're doing right now. What's your vision? What's your mission? And why do you always want to create an environment where you're teaching the next generation of sourcers?
So that's actually two questions in one there. So let me answer the second one first, is why the desire to want to be training people. So I actually come from a long line of teachers. My grand was a teacher, my mom was a teacher, and I think it's just kind of inherent in me that impart knowledge. I've never been one to learn something and then just keep it to myself. I very excitedly like to share what I've learned or something new that I've discovered. So that to me just is like a personality trait, that's something that I just do. Where I am now with regards to being all over the world and speaking, I've actually just got back from Cape Town. I was in Cape Town presenting at a conference last week. Next up is Turkey. I'm in Turkey next month in Istanbul. The month after that in May, I'm off to Spain, to Barcelona to present there. Yeah, a couple of things happening. Training all over South Africa for now. I've just been asked to train a team in Mauritius. I'm just trying to fit that into the schedule. There always seems to be something going on. And it's actually really refreshing to see all of the in-person events kicking off again, just the way that I like it, to be honest.
These conferences and the recruiting industry and landscape has undergone significant changes over the last couple of years. How have you witnessed the evolution of recruiting practices, and what do you believe the key drivers behind these changes are?
That's interesting. So recruitment has changed. I mean, I think every industry in the world's been kind of thrust onto its head at the moment because of pretty much 18 months in now since OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And then we've got a whole lot of other AI products that are coming into the market. And I think everyone's kind of just in the wait and see position. Everyone's dabbling, everyone's kind of playing around with it, but we haven't figured out exactly what is the best way to use AI. I think that we're getting close, but no one's really hit the nail on the head yet. The biggest changes is I'm not that much of an old recruiter that I remember faxing, CVs and resumes. Although I know that there's a couple of those in our midst, but it's definitely got it went to being quite personalized when I started, to being very transactional. And I think we're creeping back into the personalization. Predictions for the future in recruiting are something I'm looking at now. And you and I discuss this often, is the community side. I do believe that community is going to be a massive part of recruitment in the future. But I think that this is going to be normal for all of us in society. We're going to continue to grow and develop the communities that we've.
Help me understand a little more about, ChatGPT, how you're teaching the next generation of sourcers how to utilize that without losing that personal connection and that community piece that we all love being in this industry.
So it's really interesting because I'm sure that we've all been on the receiving end of some pretty bad ChatGPT generated emails, LinkedIn posts. We've all seen them. And I think that that's the danger, is that ChatGPT does lend itself to be easily used, easy. People understand it very quickly. They can use it, but then they use it badly. It really is highlighting a lot of lazy recruiters, putting them under the microscope, which isn't good for them. But super interesting question, because ChatGPT is wonderful. It really is great. It has allowed me to be a lot more efficient with the way that I work, how I get things done, what I produce, those kind of things. But I also don't rely on it 100%. And I also will always edit the content that I've created. And I think that that's really important. So yeah, ChatGPT is here. It's here to stay. I think that we're seeing a lot of people that are using it well and freeing themselves up to be more human. So how I'm trying to use it is create more time for you to say things like, geez, Vanessa, we see you all over the place. You all over LinkedIn, or, you're going to present at conferences, because I'm freeing up more time to be more of a human being, which I think is, for me, is the attraction piece, is that, accessible. I get back to people quickly when they send me messages. And that's kind of what I'm trying to foster, because no one really wants to be dealing with someone who only responds using ChatGPT, or dealing with a chatbot. The more human we can be, the more we're actually going to be standing out in the future.
I saw something that you posted not too long ago, talked about perspective, and you said generative AI is only as good as the prompter and the screener. Walk me through that quote, and how does one get better at utilizing prompts within the AI chat GPT space?
Okay, so just to talk you through it, I mean, it's true. I mean, if you're lazy, it's like, let's put it in recruiter terms. You're a recruiter, you use your CRM or your ATS system badly, and you put in really scant information about the candidate. There's no tags, whatever. You're going to end up with a bad result. Next time you go and search for that candidate, you're not going to find it. Now, exactly the same with your prompting. If you're lazy, you don't put in enough information, you're going to get a very generic kind of result on the other side. And it's probably going to be too long. It's probably going to be very verbose. You've got to really rein in ChatGPT and say answer in 200 words or 5 sentences or whatever it is you're looking for. But the prompting is essential. The prompting is pretty much everything. When we first started hearing about OpenAI and ChatGPT, there was a new role that was coming to play, a prompt engineer. But now everyone's a prompt engineer, because we're all using it, but we're all using it with varying amounts of success, and it's down to the prompts. So for me, using a framework is the best way to kind of communicate with ChatGPT and give it very, very clear instructions. So it's not just always a quick time saver to use ChatGPT, because you've actually got to put the time in to get your prompts better, to to really understand the art of prompting. So it's not actually just a quick win. So things like, giving it a persona, IT recruiter with 10 years experience. Give it a task, break it down. If it doesn't get it right, go back and tell it why it didn't, then kind of iterate your prompt and say, this is what I'm looking for more. Maybe more detail will help. So it's a lot more about giving as much information as possible and not just being quick and rushing and copying and pasting whatever is produced as an end result.
Do you think when people read a chat GPT post on a social media platform, maybe the
Mhm.
content is really, really good, but they utilize chat GPT and it's pretty apparent that they did lose the credibility because they utilize a chat GPT of creating the words? What's your thoughts on that?
I would say absolutely. It comes down to trust, doesn't it? So if you know some, you know the way they communicate, you know the way that they've written their previous, 50 LinkedIn posts, and then you suddenly see a post that doesn't sound like them, using words which they don't generally use, maybe throwing in excessive amounts of emojis, or if they normally use emojis, no emojis, large amounts of hashtags, then you've got to start thinking, okay, can I trust this? Where's this post come from? And I think that's when you talk about credibility, the word we should be using is trust, because now all of a sudden I think two things. I'm like, has this person had a dip in their confidence that they don't trust what they're going to put in a post, that they've had to go to chat GPT? Or are they just being lazy because now chat GPT is an option? And then finally, what I actually think is, can I trust this? Or now has this person decided that they're going to go and sign up for some software that's going to post on their LinkedIn page for them every day, so it looks like they're keeping busy? So again, breakdown of trust. I just don't understand it.
You talked a little bit about lazy recruiters. I feel like as technology has evolved, there's always going to be two personas within recruiters and sourcers. Ones that are trying to get ahead of the game, understand the latest and greatest technology, and not understand it, but actually dive in deep and how to utilize it. And then there's also like the quote unquote lazy recruiters that think that, okay, AI is in the mix now. Now it's going to help my job easier, and I'll just rely on that, whether it's reviewing resumes, whether it's doing messaging, whatever it may be. And they're just continue to fall back on the latest and greatest technology. Do you see that in the industry that there always will be the 2%?
Yeah, I just think that that's kind of human nature, though, isn't it? Is, you're always going to be, having someone who's looking for the shortcut. It's just the nature of the beast. And then you're going to find someone who's going to look at this and say, okay, interesting. I'm not going to be threatened by it, but how can I use it to do better? And I think that you've got to be in the latter, because if you're in the former, it's really going to put that spotlight onto you and, your poor performance and the fact that you're always looking for the easy way out, which no one as a boss wants to see their team doing things like that, right?
You're at these conferences, you're talking to a wide variety of different organizations, different countries. How have you seen AI reshaping the recruiting and sourcing landscape? And how has it changed those specific roles? And what have you been hearing on the ground floor?
Super interesting. So I think that it hasn't reshaped it completely just yet. I mean, I think if we're going to be talking about talent sourcing, I think what LinkedIn's doing with redacting the information of people's profiles, having an impact on X-ray searches is actually be far more impactful than AI coming into play. But, that's allegedly been done because of AI, and they don't want bots, crawling information on their site, again, which is fair enough. What I'm hearing is such a mixed bag. I'm literally hearing from people evangelizing AI, they're absolutely loving it, it's changed their lives, to people that are like, you know what, I'm actually too nervous, so I haven't gone to play with any chat GPT. And literally that's how broad it is. I mean, it took me a while to get into it because I was in the process of building my online academy when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. So I understand that it can be a bit daunting when everyone was talking about it. But my advice is always to people, just go and immerse yourself in it. Go and play around with it. You're not Only if your name's Rolf are you going to break the internet. You're not going to do anything wrong, but go and try and figure out how you can use it more effectively. So one of the best things that I've managed to do recently is to build my own custom GPTs. I've paid for the paid version of OpenAI for a long time now, but mainly because I actually train AI workshops for recruiters, and I couldn't really, in the middle of a training session, have you've reached capacity, please come back in 2 or 3 hours. I mean, that wouldn't work. So I paid for it, but I mean, that's the only reason. But now the fact that I've actually managed to build the custom GPT, it's been revolutionary because now I almost have my on tap virtual PA that I can give instructions to, and it comes up content that sounds like me, that's linked to my training courses. It knows the names of my training courses. It knows the learning outcomes per course because I've kind of fed all of that information into it.
One day you're like, okay, I'm going to take the plunge. And where do you start? Like, it's so daunting for somebody to just like, hey, I'm going to create my own GPT. And how did you start? Where did you go? And walk me through that process.
So I don't think I ever set out to build my own GPT, to be honest. I would probably, if I've heard that, I would be like, nah, I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. I would have given up. What I do a lot of is I watch a lot of YouTube videos and learn. So I was watching a YouTube video on better ways to use. I think I was curious because I realized that there was something more, like I could be doing more with AI, but what did that look like? And I was watching a video, and it was actually all about OpenAI's ChatGPT and how you could use it more effectively. So it went through like how you can customize, feed your information into the tool. This is on the free version too. And you can say, how do you want ChatGPT to answer, which was great. And then it kind of just led on to actually seeing there's a couple of people here with their own GPT. I discovered a couple of ones in line with recruiting and talent sourcing. And I was like, okay, wow, this is something. How did they put these together? And then I did a little bit of research and I was like, I can actually build one of these myself. So mine's obviously not a public GPT because I don't need to or want to share it with anyone. But there's a lot of good public ones out there to get you started.
Do you have any recommendations for the listeners? I put in a prompt. How does it start learning your style and your messaging and how you want it to be? Is there any specific prompts that help it not sound like ChatGPT?
So it's a good question. And it's frustrated me for a long time with ChatGPT. And the only way I got around it was building my own. Because I literally will send an email to a client and I'll copy and paste and feed it into the knowledge base and say, this is how I write, add it to your knowledge base. I'll put in a LinkedIn post. Again, I'll feed it in and say, this is my tone when I write LinkedIn posts. Just so that it knows. I mean, the more you feed it, the better it's going to get. So you can prompt it. I mean, what will help if you're on the free version is, the customization. So set the scene, where you're based, what work do you do? Say how do you want your responses? I mean, I write in there, don't sell to me. I don't like salesy responses. Keep your answers short because we all know ChatGPT is just ridiculously verbose. I say use humor, those kind of things. So it appeals to me. But the only way to get the output of what I've asked it, when I've asked it to create content for myself, was to actually create my own GPT.
Creating a strong employer brand and personal brand is something that everybody has to do in 2024 to stay relevant. What are some tips to create that personal brand all over social media and creating an avenue where somebody will approach you and you're going to help them succeed in their career?
Interesting, because I've only actually used generative AI to create imagery. So I love playing around on Dolly, those kind of things, but I've used it to generate a couple of LinkedIn posts, but they tanked. I don't know what it was. I don't know whether LinkedIn could pick up that I had used ChatGPT. I did edit it, but it still just didn't sound right. So that's one thing that I never do is all of my posts on every platform, they are all authentic and genuine. It is me. And that's the way that I like it because that's what gets the response. I've got no issues with suddenly, putting in a Mid-Journey image or Dolly image or something like that attached to that post. But that for me is a big differentiator. I mean, I know a lot of people are using AI tools or softwares in order to be able to, schedule their posts. LinkedIn lets you do that itself these days. It's up to you, completely up to you. I just prefer all of that for myself to be organic. I mean, it's been successful. I have built up what I like to think is a really good personal brand, which is why I'm sitting in South Africa here talking to you, one of my favorite clients in the US. It's why I go and speak at conferences all over the world. Is I put it down to my personal brand. And I take a lot of pride in what I write and posting and getting back to people and responding to comments. I wouldn't want to hand that part of my business or part of me over to any kind of AI tool, to be honest.
How have you grown with so many followers and speaking at these well-known conferences? What would you tell somebody that really wants to take that step in their career and get more involved?
It's actually interesting because this is what I am talking about at the conference on Monday for SpeakEZ. It's a conference about what are you most passionate about in the recruitment space. And I don't ever think that your geography, your location should have an impact on the impact that you can have on the global recruitment or global sourcing world. I think it's about giving back. So if there is anyone out there listening who would like to get a little bit more involved, elevate their brand, their status in the community, you got to give it a lot back. And I think that that's where I started. It's people, I'm sure, look at there's Vanessa and she's traveling around the world and she's speaking at conferences. They probably think, oh, bucket loads. What a lot of people don't actually realize is that I don't get paid to speak, but yes, I get all of my travel kind of sponsored and nice accommodation and things like that, which is great. So I have as much fun doing it because I like to share with other people as we've established, and I like to see new countries. But it's definitely, now I'm getting paid for a couple of gigs that I'm presenting at, but it's not something that's just a given. So I think that you've got to really try hard to give back, stay humble, be authentic, be honest, and help others. I mean, I give away so much free advice and help people with Boolean strings. And, I think even today I've been contacted by people that I trained before COVID. Like, Vanessa, there was something you spoke about. I forget what it was, but it did this. What was the name of the tool? And I'm like, I don't even remember the person. I responded to them because that's what you do. And it's time consuming, and not every hour is billable when you're running a community and you're trying to give back, but hopefully at the end of the day, it does pay off. I'm a big believer in karma in life.
Help me understand or some tips of how you personally utilize AI from a sourcing standpoint.
So for me, I think it's very good at explaining things. So, I often will take the role description, I'll actually pop it into Chat GPT and say, explain this to me like I'm 10 years old. Because especially on the heavy technical roles, don't even dispute that Google's still around. If you want to get the honest answer, Google or Google Gemini, because, GPT can hallucinate and can always call it a people pleaser, that it tries to, if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to take a jolly good guess at it. So it's always about getting more clarity, things that take a lot of time, but they don't really need to, like candidate summaries. I work as a solopreneur, so it's pretty much me sitting in this office here. And I often ask it questions, so if I need some advice or how else could I present the CV, or what questions could I ask someone who's really technical in this, it give me the answers. So it helps in a lot of preparation around interviews, meeting new candidates, meeting new clients. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It really and truly is. You just need to go with your gut and sense check what is coming back to you, because every now and again it throws a complete curveball. I mean, I actually popped in my LinkedIn profile to ChatGPT during a training session yesterday. I was training a team in Ireland, and it came back and it said, Vanessa's a very well-known fashion designer. And I was like, you actually couldn't be further from the truth. But that's what it came up with. And it came back with like complete honesty, straight faced. And I was like, this is why you've always got to sort of know, and don't always ask for results that are completely black and white. I use it a lot when I need something that can be maybe a little bit more generic. So I'm not going to go in and type who's the head of DevOps at Amazon in the Seattle office? Okay, because you're not going to get that. But I can say is if I was heading up the DevOps team for a major retail organization, what might I have studied, or what certifications might I have, or what would my career look like? Something like that, because it's not just a black or white answer.
For recruiters that haven't been in this industry and they're just tapping into it in the world of 2024, what would you tell them to jumpstart their career in recruiting?
Never get too involved in a job where you are too busy to focus on your personal brand. Your personal brand always needs to take preference. Don't worry about the fact that, you're concentrating on your personal brand and it's not the company brand. I mean, that's why they've got a marketing team. You can innovate both if it's your own brand, but that is the one thing that you will take with you when you leave one day. So whether that's a retrenchment, whether that's a layoff, whatever you want to call it, I've seen a lot of people that have had their head down, recruiting hard, sourcing hard, and they haven't really come up for air, and they've only used LinkedIn to try and find talent, but they haven't created a brand. They haven't positioned themselves as the go-to recruiter in a certain space. So what I'm seeing a lot is that those people now put themselves on the job market, but everything's out of date on all of the platforms. So now they're almost starting again with, putting posts out there, updating profiles, which wastes a lot of time. Also, on the flip side of that is that when you go into interviews and the people that you're working for are often more interested in buying your network that comes with you if you've specialized in a certain space as a recruiter. And if you don't have that, the person who has the network is often going to be hired before you. And that's what people forget. They get so ingrained and engrossed in whatever they're doing, blood, sweat, and tears for the company, and you never know what the future holds. So that would be the one thing, like just literally focus on your brand because it's the one thing that you are going to keep forever.
Can you share a story or somebody that comes to mind who has significantly influenced your career within the recruiting world?
You know what, Daniel, there's been a few. There really have been a few, and I'm really grateful to the global sourcing community. I really and truly am. There's some wonderful folk that have really helped me in my career. But if there was one thing or one moment that I actually needed to kind of highlight and say this was the defining moment for me, was back in 2018. I conned my boss, or persuaded him, or begged and pleaded to send me to a sourcing conference at Budapest in Hungary. It was the first SourceCon that was held in Europe. And literally, I did the graft. I wrote 5 blogs, so I didn't have to pay for my tickets. South African rands just don't go anywhere. Got myself over there and had an awesome 2 days. Met lots of people. It was just incredible. I mean, I've hung out with these people online so many times before. Now to actually meet them in person was just great. I remember walking into the room and just thinking, wow, I've arrived. This is my people. At the end of it, Shannon Pritchard, who you know well, came to me and said, Van, it's been great to meet you. Thanks for coming all the way from South Africa. You're our first person from Africa who's attended a SourceCon conference. We're hosting a conference in Seattle in March next year, 2019. Would you like to come and present? And I remember just being completely shell-shocked. I didn't really know what to say. So Katrina Connier, who was standing next to me, completely just elbowed me in the ribs and said, just say yes, we'll figure it out later. And I did, and literally the rest is history, because what was a result of that is going to SourceCon in Budapest. I literally wrote my resignation letter on my way home on the flight. I knew that it was time to move on, and the company had just sold to a corporate and it wasn't for me anymore. I then launched my own business in March. I actually remember the date. I spoke on the 21st of March because it's a public holiday, nearly coming up to a couple of years now, because it's next week. It's a public holiday in South Africa. When I stood on the stage, did a keynote after Glenn Cathy, of all people, Shannon put me up to do a keynote. And the response was absolutely unbelievable. I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. I literally stood up and I spoke about growing up in apartheid South Africa and how it affects the way we recruit, and how, DE&I is a thing, but we must do it for the right reasons and all of those things. So to cut a long story short, that was a defining moment, because here I was, relative nobody, standing on stage, presenting at a SourceCon event, And I launched my own business like well timed that week. So Shannon actually gave me the confidence to launch my own business and to also just give it such an amazing platform to say, this is what I'm doing. I'm training people to source. And, to kind of mention that when you're standing on stage delivering a keynote to SourceCon was a real career defining moment for me. So I'll be forever grateful.
I feel like those conferences, and like you touched on before, is the in-person conferences that are starting to come back into momentum, is hearing stories like that relationships are built beyond a handshake, and really defining moments happen even outside of the conference walls. It's building those relationships and continuing those relationships after the conference and years to
For sure.
come. So it's really, really cool to hear that. Any last minute words of advice for our listeners as we wrap up?
Company just to follow on from the vein of be yourself, be authentic. You've always got something to offer. I think that that's also really important. You writing the story of your own life. Don't give anyone else the pen, and kind of stick to your guts. I think a lot of people get, a little bit of the imposter syndrome, which don't worry, we all have imposter syndrome, but they don't believe that they can do it. But we all have something of value to offer this world. It's about defining what can we bring to our unique space and then keep growing it.
As we conclude our conversation with Vanessa, we're inspired by her journey and dedication to elevating the talent sourcing community for years to come. I want to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your passion with us on the speakeZy podcast. Your impact on the industry is truly remarkable, and we look forward to seeing where the journey takes you next. So keep sourcing with purpose and recruiting from the heart. So I thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Daniel.